Mountain, Part 1. The mountain was there.
Feng Fan, today I am going to understand this strange habit of yours. Why do you never go ashore? 5 years. I cannot remember how many countries and ports Bluewater has visited, but you have never once left the ship. If Bluewater is retired someday, will you sink with her like a character in an old film?
I will transfer to another ship. Oceanographic survey vessels always need a geologist who does not go ashore.
Is there something on land that frightens you?
On the contrary, there is something on land that I long for.
What?
Mountains.
They stood on the port side of the Oceanographic survey ship, Bluewater, looking out across the equatorial Pacific. A year earlier, when Bluewater first crossed the equator, the crew had still performed the old ritual for fun.
Then a field of manganese nodules was found on the seafloor. In the year that followed, Bluewater crossed the equator so many times that the crew almost forgot the line existed.
The sun had dropped below the horizon, and the Pacific was unnaturally calm. Feng Fan had rarely seen the sea so still. It reminded him of lakes in the Himalayas, so clear they seemed black, like the eyes of the earth.
Once, he and 2 teammates had spied on Tibetan girls bathing in one of those lakes. A few herdsmen came after them with waste knives, and when they could not catch them, they began slinging stones with terrifying accuracy.
The 3 climbers finally raised their hands in surrender. The herdsmen came close, studied them for a while, and left. Feng Fan understood the Tibetan words they muttered. They had never seen outsiders run so fast in that place.
You like mountains? Then you must have grown up in them.
No. People who grow up in mountains often do not love them. They feel the mountains cut them off from the world. I knew a Nepalese Sherpa guide who had climbed Everest 41 times. Every time he stopped just short of the summit and watched the teams that hired him go on without him.
He said that if he wished, from either the north side or the south, he could reach the top of Everest within 10 hours. But he had no interest. The charm of a mountain is felt from 2 places, from a plain far away, and from the summit itself.
My home was on the Great Plain of Hebei. To the west you could see the Taihang Mountains. Between my home and the mountains lay a flatness like this sea, open and unobstructed.
Not long after I was born, when my neck had only just become strong enough to hold up my little head, my mother carried me outside for the first time. I babbled toward the mountains in the west.
When I was learning to walk, I always staggered in that direction. When I was older, I set out one morning along the Shijiazhuang-Taiyuan Railway and walked toward the mountains until noon, when hunger made me turn back. The mountains still looked just as far away.
After I started school, I rode a bicycle toward them. They seemed to retreat as I advanced, never growing any closer. Over time, those distant mountains became a symbol to me. Like the things in life we can see clearly and never reach. They were a dream frozen on the horizon. I have been through that region. Those mountains are barren. Nothing but broken stone and wild grass. You are destined for disappointment.
No, I do not think of them the way you do. I only want to climb them. I do not expect them to give me anything. The first time I stood on a summit and saw the plain that had raised me spread out below, I felt as if I had been born a second time.
As Feng Fan spoke, he realized that the captain was no longer fully listening. The captain had tilted his head toward the sky, where a few thin stars had begun to appear.
There, at the zenith, there should not be a star there.
But there was a star there, faint and unremarkable.
Are you sure? GPS replaced the sextant a long time ago. Are you still that familiar with the sky?
Of course. It is basic seamanship. Go on.
Later, at university, I organized a climbing team. We climbed several peaks above 7,000 meters. The last one was Everest.
I guessed right. It really is you. I kept thinking you looked familiar. You changed your name?
Yes, I used to be Feng Bei.
You drew a great deal of attention a few years ago. Was what the media said true?
Mostly. The 4 university climbers did die because of me.
The captain struck a match and relit his pipe.
I think a climbing leader and a deep-sea captain have one thing in common. The hardest lesson is not how to fight for something. It is how to give it up.
But if I had given up then, I might never have had another chance. Mountaineering is expensive. We were a student team, and sponsorship had been hard to get.
The Sherpa support team and guides we hired went on strike, and that delayed the building of Camp 1. Then a storm was forecast, but from the satellite images it looked at least 20 hours away.
We had already built Camp 2 at 7,900 meters. If we left for the summit immediately, there should still be enough time. Tell me, could I have given up then?
That star is getting brighter.
It is just getting dark.
I do not think that is why. Keep going.
You probably know the rest. When the storm came, we were between 8,680 and 8,710 meters, on the most dangerous section. A near-vertical cliff climbers call the Chinese ladder on the second step.
The summit was already close. The sky was still clear, with only a thread of cloud forming on one side of the peak. I remember thinking Everest was a sharp blade cutting open the sky, and that thread of cloud was white blood leaking out.
Then everything vanished. The storm drove snow mist so dense that it blew 4 team members straight off the cliff. I was the only one left, holding the rope with all my strength.
But my ice axe was only caught in a crack. It could not possibly hold the weight of 5 people. By instinct, I cut the steel connector on the climbing rope and let them fall. 2 of their bodies have never been found.
It was a question of 5 deaths or 4.
Yes. According to the emergency rules of mountaineering, I was not wrong. But from then on, I carried a cross for the rest of my life. You are right. That star is abnormal. It is still growing brighter.
Leave it for the moment. Is your present condition because of that climb?
What else could it be? The media buried me under condemnation and contempt. They called me irresponsible, selfish, cowardly, a man who sacrificed 4 companions to save himself.
I could at least partly refute the last accusation. So one day, I put on that climbing suit, wore sunglasses, and climbed the drain pipe to the top of the college library. Just before I jumped, my advisor came up behind me. He asked whether that was not too easy a sentence for myself.
You are escaping a heavier punishment.
I asked whether such a punishment existed. Of course it does. Find the place farthest from mountains and live there for the rest of your life. Never let yourself see a mountain again. Would that not do?
So I did not jump. Of course it brought more ridicule, but only I knew he was right. For me, that was indeed heavier than death.
I had treated climbing as my life. I had studied geology for that reason, too. To leave the mountains I loved for a lifetime, together with the torture of conscience, was fitting.
After graduation, I found this job, became the marine geologist on Bluewater, and came out to sea, to the place farthest from mountains.
The captain stared at Feng Fan for a long time and found nothing to say. At last he chose to escape the weight of the man before him, and the sky above provided an exit.
Look at that star again.
My God, it seems to have a shape now.
The star was no longer a point. It was a small disk, expanding rapidly, becoming in moments a conspicuous blue sphere in the sky. The sound of hurried footsteps dragged their attention back to the deck. The first mate, wearing headphones, ran toward them.
Captain, we've received reports. An alien spacecraft is approaching Earth. From our equatorial position, we have the clearest view. There it is.
The 3 men looked up. The sphere was still swelling, as if inflated, and soon it was the size of the full moon.
Every radio station has interrupted regular programming for this. The object was observed earlier, but only now have they confirmed what it is. It answers no inquiry, but from its orbit, it must have enormous power. It is rushing toward Earth at high speed. They say it is as large as the moon.
Now the body in space looked far larger than the moon. 10 moons might have fit inside it. It occupied a broad region of the sky, which meant it was much closer to Earth than the moon was.
They say it has stopped, exactly at the geostationary altitude of 36,000 kilometers. It has become a geostationary satellite of Earth.
A geostationary satellite? You mean it is hanging there without moving?
Yes, above the equator, directly above us.
Feng Fan stared into the sphere. It seemed transparent, filled with a dim blue light. Strangely, it gave him the sensation of staring into the sea. Before a seabed sampler rose to the surface, the ocean often took on a depth that fascinated him.
Now the interior of the blue giant sphere had that same unfathomable depth, as if some lost portion of Earth's ancient ocean were returning.
Look at the sea. What is happening to the sea?
The captain was the first to tear himself away from the hypnotic spear. He pointed his pipe toward the water.
The line between sea and sky ahead began to bend into an upward arch, like a sine wave. The sea bulged into a gigantic mound, rising fast, as though an invisible hand from space were lifting it.
It is the spacecraft's mass. Its gravity is pulling the seawater up.
Feng Fan was surprised that he could still think clearly. The ship had a mass comparable to the moon, but it was only 1/10 as far away. Fortunately, it was fixed in geostationary orbit, so the uplifted water was fixed too. Otherwise, world-destroying tides would have swept the planet.
The mound rose to a height that joined sea and sky, forming a vast, blunt cone. It reflected the sphere's blue light, while the dark red glow of sunset traced its edges in blood.
At its top, the cold air formed a thread of mist that drifted a little way and vanished, as if the evening sky had been cut open. Something moved in Feng Fan's heart. He remembered the white blood of Everest.
Measure its height.
Approximately 9,100 meters.
Before the most terrifying and magnificent spectacle in Earth's history, everyone seemed fixed by a spell.
This is fate.
What did you say?
I said this is fate.
Yes, it was fate. To flee mountains, Feng Fan had come to the middle of the Pacific. And here, in the place farthest from mountains, a mountain of water had appeared, 200 meters higher than Everest. It was now the highest mountain on Earth.
Port 5, ahead 4. We had better run for our lives.
Run! Is there danger?
The spacecraft's gravity has created a huge low-pressure region. A cyclone is forming. It may become the largest storm in history, strong enough to throw Bluewater into the air like a leaf. Let us hope we can get out before the cyclone forms.
Captain, it is worse than you think. Radio says the aliens have come to destroy Earth, and their spacecraft's mass alone is enough. Its gravity is not producing an ordinary storm. It is producing an atmospheric leak.
A leak? Leaking into what?
The ship's gravity will pull a hole in the atmosphere, like puncturing a balloon. Air will escape into space through that hole. Earth's atmosphere will drain away.
How long would that take?
Experts say about a week. Global air pressure will fall below the fatal limit. They also say that when pressure falls far enough, the oceans will begin to boil. Major cities are already in chaos. People are storming hospitals and factories for oxygen.
Even Cape Canaveral has been invaded by crowds trying to seize the liquid oxygen used as rocket fuel.
A week? Then we do not even have time to go home.
No, not even time to go home.
In that case, we should each go do the thing we most want to do.
Sudden excitement rose in Feng Fan, and his blood seemed to burn.
What do you want to do?
Climb.
Climb? This mountain?
Yes. It is the highest peak in the world now. The mountain is there. Someone has to climb it.
How?
Mountaineering is done on foot. So, by swimming.
Are you mad? You think you can swim up a 9-kilometer water slope?
It looks 45 degrees steep. This is not like climbing. You have to keep swimming. If you stop, you slide down.
I want to try.
Let him go! If at a time like this we still cannot live according to our wishes, when can we? How far are we from the foot of that water mountain?
About 20 kilometers.
Take a lifeboat. Remember to bring food and water.
Thank you.
In fact, you are very lucky.
I think so too. Captain, there is one more thing I never told you. Among the 4 university climbers who died on Everest was the woman I loved. When I cut the rope, the thought that flashed through my mind was this: I cannot die. There are other mountains.
Go.
What about us?
Full speed out of the forming storm. If we gain one more day, we take it.
Standing in the lifeboat, Feng Fan watched Bluewater draw away. He had once planned to spend his life aboard her. On the other side, beneath the giant sphere in space, the mountain of seawater stood in silence, as though it had always been there.
The sea was still calm, but the wind was slowly strengthening. Air was already gathering toward the low-pressure zone around the sea mountain. The lifeboat had a small sail, and Feng Fan raised it.
The wind was not yet strong, but it blew directly toward the mountain. The boat moved steadily toward its foot. As the wind increased, the sail filled, and the bow cut the water like a blade.
The 20-kilometer crossing took only 40 minutes. When the lifeboat's deck began to tilt on the watery slope, Feng Fan leapt into the blue-lit sea. He became the first person to climb a mountain by swimming.
The summit was already out of sight. Looking up from the water, Feng Fan saw an endless slope of sea, about 45 degrees, as if a giant had lifted half the ocean before him. He used the most economical breaststroke and thought of the first mate's warning. It was about 13 kilometers to the summit. On level water he could swim that far. But this was an ascent, and to stop was to lose ground.
Reaching the top was almost impossible, but Feng Fan did not regret the attempt. To climb the Everest of seawater was already a reward beyond his mountaineering dreams.
Then he felt something strange. The slope was clearly steepening, his body tilting upward with the surface, yet swimming was not becoming harder. He looked back. The lifeboat he had left at the foot of the mountain, its sail lowered, still sat steadily on the slope and did not slide down.
Feng Fan stopped swimming and observed carefully. He did not slide either. He floated in place on the tilted surface.
The first mate and I are idiots. If the liquid seawater on this slope does not slide down, why would a person or a boat on it slide?
Now Feng Fan knew the sea mountain belonged to him. He continued upward, and the climb became easier. Raising his head to breathe was effortless because his body was becoming lighter.
Other signs of reduced gravity appeared. Splashes fell more slowly. The waves on the slope rose and traveled more slowly. The sea lost its masculine violence and revealed a softness impossible under normal gravity.
As the wind strengthened, ranks of waves formed on the slope. In low gravity, they rose much higher, and their shapes changed, thin as cicada wings, curling into themselves as they fell slowly. They looked like transparent shavings planed from the surface of the sea by some invisible giant tool.
The waves did not hinder Feng Fan. They moved toward the summit and pushed him upward.
As gravity weakened further, something more wonderful happened. The thin waves no longer merely pushed him. They lifted him gently into the air. For an instant, his entire body left the water. Then the next wave caught him and threw him onward.
He was passed upward by one gentle, powerful hand of the sea after another. He discovered that the butterfly stroke was now the most efficient.
The wind kept rising, gravity kept falling,
and the waves on the slope exceeded 10 meters while their motion grew slower. In the weak gravity, water did not grind violently against water. These huge waves made almost no sound. There was only wind.
Feng Fan leapt from crest to crest. The time he spent airborne now exceeded the time he spent in water. He no longer knew whether he was swimming or flying.
Several times, a thin giant wave closed over him. He entered a tunnel of rolling water film. Above him, the membrane curled slowly, soaked in the blue light of the sphere. Through the water film, he saw the alien spacecraft in space. The sphere trembled and deformed behind it, as if seen through tears.
He looked at the waterproof watch on his left wrist. He had been climbing for an hour. At this unexpected speed, another hour at most would bring him to the summit.
Then Feng Fan suddenly thought of Bluewater. At the present rate of wind growth, the cyclone would form very soon, and Bluewater could not possibly escape the superstorm.
He realized that the captain had made a fatal mistake. The ship should have sailed straight toward the sea mountain because the gravitational component along the water slope did not exist. Bluewater could have reached the summit as easily as crossing calm water.
And the summit was the eye of the storm, the place of stillness. Feng Fan hurriedly pulled the walkie-talkie from his life jacket and called, but no one answered.
He had mastered the art of leaping from wave to wave. After another 20 minutes, he had covered 2/3 of the route. The rounded summit was not far away, glowing softly in the alien light like a new planet waiting for him.
Then the rushing wind became a terrifying scream, coming from every direction at once. The wind surged. Thin waves 20 or 30 meters high were shredded in mid-air before they could fall.
The water slope was covered with torn wave crests, like wild hair thrashing in the wind, blazing white under the giant sphere. Feng Fan made his final leap. A nearly 30-meter wave launched him into the air, and at the instant he left it, the gale pulverized it.
He fell slowly toward a row of waves ahead. They opened like transparent wings, as if to receive him. The moment his hand touched the rising crest, the crystal membrane shattered into white mist. In breaking, it gave a sound strangely like laughter.
At the same time, Feng Fan's lightened body stopped falling. He drifted farther and farther from the insane sea, carried into the sky like a feather. He tumbled in the low-gravity airflow. In his dizziness, the glowing sphere in space seemed to whirl around him.
When he managed to steady himself, he found that he was circling above the summit of the sea mountain.
From that height, the ranks of waves on the mountain were long curves marking the spiral convergence of the cyclone toward the peak. His circles tightened, and his speed increased. He was being blown toward the center of the vortex.
When he entered the eye, the wind suddenly weakened. The invisible hands of air released him, and Feng Fan fell toward the top of the sea mountain, plunging into the blue water at its center.
He sank for a long time before beginning to rise. The water around him was dark, and then came the panic of suffocation.
Feng Fan realized his danger. The last breath before impact had been taken at nearly 10,000 meters, where oxygen was thin. In low gravity, he rose through the water slowly. Even if he swam upward, the air in his lungs might not last.
A familiar feeling swept over him. He was again inside the black snow dust of the Everest storm, and the fear of death swallowed everything. Then he noticed several silver spheres rising beside him. The largest was about a meter across. He suddenly understood. They were bubbles.
In low gravity, seawater could produce enormous bubbles. He swam hard toward the largest, pushed his head through its silver wall, and could breathe at once.
When the dizziness of oxygen deprivation passed, he found himself inside a spherical chamber. For the second time, he had entered a space made of water.
Through the bubble's round roof,
He saw the wavering surface above. As they rose and pressure fell, the bubble expanded rapidly, opening the space over his head.
It felt as though he were riding a crystal balloon into the sky. The blue brightness above grew stronger, then blinding. With a soft pop, the bubble burst, and Feng Fan surfaced. In low gravity, he shot almost a meter above the water, then settled down slowly.
The first thing he saw was countless beautiful water spheres drifting down around him. They varied in size. The largest were as large as footballs. They reflected the blue light of the sphere in space, and within them were many nested layers.
They were the splashes from his own fall. In low gravity, surface tension had shaped them into globes. He caught one in his hand, and when it broke, it gave a clear metallic note that water should never make.
The summit of the sea mountain was very calm. Waves from every direction canceled one another here, leaving only broken ripples. This was clearly the center of the storm, the only still place in a world gone mad. Yet the stillness stood against another immense sound, the roar of the cyclone.
Feng Fan looked up and saw that he and the sea mountain were inside a vast well. The wall of the well was made of water mist raised by the cyclone, rotating slowly around the mountain and stretching high into the sky.
At the mouth of the well was the alien spacecraft. It hung like a great lamp in space, pouring blue light down into the shaft. Around the sphere, Feng Fan saw strange filamentary clouds, like a loose net of silk, bright as if they shone by themselves.
He guessed they might be ice crystal clouds formed by Earth's escaping atmosphere. They seemed to surround the spacecraft, but in fact were more than 30,000 kilometers away. If that was true, the leak in Earth's atmosphere had begun. This great cyclone well was the fatal breach.
Whatever happens, I reach the summit.
Part 2. Conversation on the summit. The light around him suddenly changed. It dimmed, then flickered. Feng Fan looked up and saw the spacecraft's blue glow vanish.
Only then did he understand that the blue glow had been the blank light of a display. The surface of the sphere itself was an enormous screen. An image appeared on it, filmed from above. A man floating on the sea, looking up. The man was Feng Fan.
After half a minute, the image disappeared. Feng Fan understood the message. The aliens were simply saying that they had seen him. At that moment, he truly felt that he stood on the summit of the world.
2 rows of words appeared on the screen, in many languages. Feng Fan recognized English, Chinese, and Japanese. The others were clearly language names as well. A dark frame moved rapidly among the words. The scene felt familiar. Soon Feng Fan realized that the frame was being controlled by his gaze.
He fixed his eyes on Chinese, and the frame stopped. He blinked once. Nothing happened. It must need a double click, he thought, and blinked twice. The frame flashed. The language menu vanished, and a large line of Chinese appeared on the sphere. Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. You do not need to shout. We can hear even the sound of a mosquito on Earth. We learned these languages from the electromagnetic broadcasts leaking from your planet. We would like to chat with you casually.
Where do you come from?
A still image appeared on the sphere, made of dense black points connected by an intricate web of fine lines. It was plainly a star map. One black point began to glow silver, brighter and brighter. Feng Fan understood none of it, but he believed Earth's astronomers would record and decode it.
The star map remained, becoming a background for text.
We built a mountain and you climbed it.
I like climbing mountains.
This is not a question of liking or disliking. We have to climb mountains.
Why? Does your world have many mountains? Feng Fan knew this was not humanity's most urgent topic, but he wanted to talk about it. If everyone around him thought climbers were fools,
He was willing to speak with a civilization that claimed it had to climb.
Mountains are everywhere. Only the way of climbing changes.
And there are many mountains where you come from.
For us, everything around us is mountain. Those mountains enclose us. We must dig tunnels in order to climb.
This confused Feng Fan. He thought for a long time and still could not understand. Part 3. Bubble World.
Our world is simple. It is a spherical space. In your units, its radius is about 3,000 kilometers. That space is surrounded by rock. Travel in any direction, and you meet a dense wall of stone. Our first model of the universe naturally followed from this. The universe had two parts: the spherical space in which we lived, and the rock surrounding it, extending infinitely in all directions. So our world was a hollow bubble in a solid universe. We called it Bubble World. That theory was called the solid universe theory.
Of course, the theory did not exclude the possibility that other bubbles existed in the infinite rock, near or far. Later, that possibility became the engine of exploration.
But rock of infinite thickness cannot exist. It would collapse under gravity.
At that time, we knew nothing of universal gravitation. There was no gravity in Bubble World. We truly became aware of gravity tens of thousands of years later.
Then those bubbles are like planets inside a solid universe. Interesting. In density distribution, your universe is the inverse of the real one, like a photographic negative of reality.
The real universe? That is a shallow phrase. You can only say the universe presently known. You do not know what the real universe is like, nor do we.
Did your world have sunlight, air, and water?
None of them. We did not need them. Our world had only solids, no gases, and no liquids.
How can there be life without gas or liquid?
We are mechanical life. Our muscles and bones are metal. Our brains are chips of ultra-high integration. Electric currents and magnetic fields are our blood. We feed on radioactive rocks in the core, using them for energy. No one manufactured us. It all arose through natural evolution.
At the beginning, under radioactive action, PN junctions formed by chance on rocks and evolved into the simplest single-celled machines. Our primitive ancestors first discovered and used electromagnetic energy. Fire, in your sense, was never discovered by us.
It must have been dark there.
There was some light, produced by radioactive matter on the inner wall of the core. That inner wall was our sky. The light was weak and wandered across the rock, but from it we evolved eyes. In the core there was weightlessness. Our cities floated in the dim space, about the size of yours. From far away they looked like glowing clouds.
Mechanical life required a far longer evolution than your carbon-based life, but our paths converged. We too reached the day when we began to think about the universe.
Still, that universe sounds terribly cramped.
Cramped. That is a new word for us. Yes, our longing for open space was even stronger than yours. In the ancient age of Bubble World, explorers began digging into the depths of the rock, trying to find other bubbles in the solid universe. Many splendid myths grew around those imagined bubbles. Fantasies of distant bubbles became the main body of Bubble World literature, but at first, exploration was forbidden. Violators were executed by short circuit.
Was it forbidden by a church?
No. There was no church. A civilization that cannot see the sun or the stars cannot produce religion. The Senate forbade tunnel exploration for practical reasons. Our living space had a radius of only 3,000 kilometers, and the rubble dug from tunnels would accumulate inside the core. If the rock was believed to be infinitely thick, a tunnel could become very long, and the rubble would eventually fill the core space. In other words, the spherical space of the core would be converted into a long tunnel space.
There seems to be a solution. Put the excavated rock into the tunnel already dug behind you, leaving only enough room for the explorers.
Later exploration did exactly that. The explorers' living space was a small moving bubble. We called it a bubble ship.
Even so, a pile of rubble equal to the bubble ship's volume entered the core space. Only when the ship returned could the rubble be filled back into the wall.
If a bubble ship never returned, that small volume of occupied core space could never be restored. It was as though the ship had stolen space, so explorers were also called space thieves. In that narrow world, even a tiny amount of space was precious. Over long ages, as ship after ship departed, the stolen volume became enormous. Thus, bubble ship exploration was also forbidden in ancient times. The enterprise was also perilous. A typical bubble ship had several diggers and one navigator. Before tunneling machines, the diggers used simple tools endlessly to move the ship through rock. They were the equivalent of oarsmen on your ships.
To labor mechanically inside a cramped cavity barely large enough to contain the crew, pursuing a faint hope in absolute confinement, required enormous spiritual force.
A bubble ship usually returned along the loosened path it had made, so return was easier. But the gamblers' hunger for discovery often drove explorers past the safe turning point.
Then they lacked the strength and supplies for the journey back. The bubble ship would be stranded on its return route and become the explorer's tomb. Even so, the outward exploration of Bubble World, small as it was, never ceased.
Part 4. Hubble Redshift.
In Bubble Era 33281, by your calendar, a small hole suddenly appeared in the rocky sky of Bubble World. A heap of broken rock flew out and drifted in the air, glittering in the radioactive glow like a cluster of stars.
A troop from the central city immediately flew to the opening. Remember, Bubble World had no gravity. They found a returning exploration ship.
It had set out 8 years earlier, and no one expected it to return. The ship was called Needle. It had advanced 200 kilometers through rock, a record distance for a returning bubble ship.
Needle had departed with 20 crew members. It came back with only its scientist aboard. Let us call him Copernicus. All the others, including the captain, had been eaten by Copernicus as food. In fact, using crew members as provisions was the most efficient early method of stratum exploration.
Under the law forbidding bubble ship exploration, and because of the cannibalism, Copernicus was to be executed in the capital of Bubble World. On that day, hundreds of thousands gathered in the central square to watch the beautiful electric sparks of his short-circuit execution.
Needle brought back rock samples from different sections of its route. We have discovered that the density of the strata decreases with distance traveled.
Your world had no gravity. How did you measure density?
Through inertia. It was more complicated than your method. At first, scientists thought Needle had merely entered an uneven region of rock, but during the following century, many ships traveled farther in different directions and returned with samples.
The result was shocking. In every direction, stratum density decreased outward, and the rate of decrease was essentially the same. This shook the solid universe theory, which had ruled Bubble World for more than 20,000 years.
If density decreased outward from Bubble World as a center, there must be a distance at which it fell to zero. Using the measured rate, scientists soon calculated that distance to be about 30,000 kilometers.
That is very much like our Hubble redshift.
It is. You could not imagine redshift velocity greater than light speed, so you defined that distance as the edge of the universe. Our ancestors, however, could easily know that zero density meant space. A new model of the universe was born.
In that model, moving outward from Bubble World, universal density gradually decreased until it thinned into space, and that space extended infinitely. The theory was called the space-universe theory.
The solid universe theory was stubborn. Its dominant supporters patched it by saying the density decrease was caused by a loose spherical layer around Bubble World. Pass through that layer, they said, and the decrease would stop. They even calculated the layer's thickness as 200 kilometers.
Verification was simple. A ship only had to pass through 300 kilometers of rock. That distance was soon reached, but the decrease continued.
So the solidus said the calculation was wrong, and the layer must be 500 kilometers thick. 10 years later, that distance was broken too. The decrease continued, and the rate per unit distance was increasing. Then they raised the supposed loose layer to 1,500 kilometers.
Later, an epoch-making discovery buried the solid universe theory forever.
Part 5. Universal Gravitation.
The ship that reached 300 kilometers into the strata was called Roundblade. It was the largest exploration ship ever built, with powerful tunneling machines and complete life support systems.
At a depth or height of 300 kilometers, the chief scientist reported something impossible to the captain. Let us call that scientist Newton. When crew members slept suspended in the center of the ship, they always woke lying against the wall facing Bubble World.
Homesick sleepwalking. Nothing more. They want to go home, so in their dreams, they drift toward home.
But a bubble ship, like Bubble World, had no air. There were only two ways to move the body. One was to push against the wall, impossible while sleeping in midair. The other was to expel waste from the body as propulsion, but Newton found no sign of that.
The captain still dismissed the matter. That negligence almost buried him alive. One day, after a round of forward digging, the exhausted crew did not immediately move the newly cut rubble to the stern. Everyone rested. The captain, like the others, slept suspended in the middle of the ship. When he woke, he and the crew were buried in rubble. During sleep, the rubble at the bow had moved together with them toward the bottom of the ship, the side facing Bubble World.
Newton soon discovered that every object in the cabin had a tendency to move toward Bubble World. The motion was simply too slow to notice most of the time.
So Newton discovered universal gravitation without an apple.
It was not so easy. In our scientific history, the birth of gravitation theory was far more difficult than in yours. Our environment made it so. When Newton discovered the directed motion, he naturally assumed gravity came from the 3,000-kilometer radius space of Bubble World.
Early gravitation theory therefore made an absurd error. It held that gravity was produced not by mass, but by space.
I can imagine it. In that physical environment, your Newton had to think more intricately than ours.
Yes. Only half a century later did scientists clear the fog, recognize the true nature of gravitation, and measure the gravitational constant with instruments similar to yours.
The acceptance of gravitation theory was a long process. But once gravity was understood, the solid universe theory was finished. Gravity does not permit an infinite solid universe.
After the space universe theory was finally accepted, the universe it described exerted a tremendous attraction on Bubble World. In Bubble World, the conserved physical quantities were not only energy and mass, but also space.
The radius of Bubble World was only 3,000 kilometers. Digging tunnels and rock could not increase space. It could only move and reshape it. Because of weightlessness, core civilization floated in space rather than living on the inner wall, what you would call land.
Space was therefore the most precious thing in Bubble World. The whole history of civilization was a bloody history of struggles for space. Now people learned that space might be infinite. How could they not be stirred?
From then on, an unprecedented wave of exploration began. Countless ships pushed outward through the strata, trying to cross the 32,000-kilometer rock predicted by the theory and reach the paradise of zero density.
Part 6. The Core World.
By now, if you are clever enough, you should infer the truth about Bubble World.
Your world is at the center of a planet, isn't it?
Correct. Our planet is about the size of Earth, with a radius of roughly 8,000 kilometers, but its core is hollow, with a hollow radius of about 3,000 kilometers. We are the life of that core.
Still, after discovering universal gravitation, it took us many centuries to understand the final truth of our world.
Part 7. The Stratum War.
After the space universe theory was established, the first price of seeking infinite space outside was the consumption of Bubble World's own finite space.
Many ships dumped vast amounts of rubble into the core. The rubble floated densely around the cities, endless and everywhere, preventing cities that once drifted freely from moving at all.
If a city moved, it would meet a devastating storm of stones. At least half the space occupied by rubble could never be restored. By then, the Senate had been replaced by a world government. As manager and defender of core space, the government began harshly suppressing the wild exploration movement.
At first, suppression was ineffective, because by the time an expedition was discovered, the ship had already penetrated deep into the strata.
The government soon realized that the best tool for stopping bubble ships was other bubble ships. It built a vast fleet, entered the strata, intercepted exploration ships, and tried to recover stolen space. The interceptions naturally met resistance. Thus, a long war broke out inside the rock.
That kind of war must have been fascinating.
And very cruel. First, its tempo was slow. With the tunneling technology of that era, a bubble ship usually moved through rock at only about 3 kilometers per hour. The war favored giant ships. The larger the ship, the greater its endurance and striking power.
But no matter how large, a stratum warship needed the smallest possible cross-section to reduce the cutting area and increase speed. Therefore, all bubble ships had nearly the same cross-section. Their size lay mainly in their length. A large warship was a long tunnel.
The battlefield in rock was three-dimensional. Combat resembled your aerial warfare, but was far more complex. When a warship attacked on contact, it rapidly expanded its bow cross-section to increase the area of attack. The attacking ship became shaped like a nail.
If necessary, the bow could branch into several prongs like an opened claw and attack from multiple directions. The complexity went further. Any ship could split into many smaller ships, and many ships could rapidly combine into a giant one.
So when two fleets met, the choice to divide or combine became a profound tactical art. The war did not only harm future exploration, it also triggered a technological revolution in Bubble World.
In addition to efficient tunneling machines, we invented seismowave instruments. They served both for communication and radar in the strata. Powerful seismic waves also became weapons. The finest seismowave communication devices could even transmit images.
The largest warship ever seen in the strata was Line World, built by the world government. In its normal traveling cross-section, Line World was 150 kilometers long. As the name suggests, it was a long little world.
Inside it, one might feel like standing in your channel tunnel. Every few minutes, a high-speed train rushed past, carrying excavated rubble toward the stern. Line World could, of course, divide into a huge fleet, but most of the time it traveled as one body.
It was not always straight. During maneuvers, its long tunnel body could form a complex knot of self-crossing and interconnecting curves.
It possessed the most advanced tunneling machines. Its cruising speed was twice that of ordinary ships, 6 kilometers per hour, and its combat speed could exceed 10. Its ultra-high-power seismowave radar could locate ships 500 kilometers away, and its seismowave weapon could pulverize everything inside a target ship from a distance of 1,000 meters.
This supership ranged through the vast strata invincibly, destroying large numbers of exploration vessels and periodically returning captured exploration space to Bubble World. Under Line World's devastating blows, outward exploration nearly stopped.
Explorers remained at a disadvantage. They could not build or combine ships longer than 10 kilometers, because such targets were easily detected and destroyed by Line World or by base radar from Bubble World. But if exploration was to continue, Line World had to be destroyed.
After long planning, the Exploration Alliance gathered more than 100 stratum warships to encircle Line World. None was longer than 5 kilometers. The battle unfolded 1,500 kilometers outward from Bubble World. It became known as the 1,500-kilometer battle.
The Alliance first combined 20 ships into a 30-kilometer giant at that distance, using it to lure Line World into attack. When Line World approached the bait and charged in a straight line at high speed, more than 100 hidden Alliance ships attacked simultaneously from a perpendicular direction. They cut the 150-kilometer giant into 50 sections. After Line World was severed, the 50 ships that split from it still had great fighting power. More than 200 vessels tangled together in a savage melee inside the rock.
Ship spaces kept combining and dividing until the sides could barely be distinguished. In the final stage, the battlefield of 200 kilometers radius had become a honeycomb.
There, 3,500 kilometers beneath the planet's surface, in a vast three-dimensional maze, close combat raged everywhere. At that position, planetary gravity was already obvious. Compared with the government forces, explorers were more accustomed to gravity.
In the immense maze battle, that slight advantage gradually became decisive. The Exploration Alliance won.
Part 8. The Sea.
After the battle, the Alliance merged all space in the battlefield into one spherical volume with a radius of 50 kilometers. In that space, the Exploration Alliance declared independence from Bubble World. After independence, the Alliance and the exploration movement inside Bubble World echoed each other. Exploration ships kept coming from the core, and the space they brought enlarged the Alliance's territory.
Explorers gained a forward base at 1,500 kilometers. Exhausted by the long war, the world government could no longer stop them and had to legalize exploration.
As altitude increased, the density of the strata decreased and tunneling became easier. Increased gravity also made rubble handling more convenient.
Later expeditions went much more smoothly. In the 8th year after the war, the ship's spiral completed the remaining 3,500 kilometers and reached an altitude 8,000 kilometers from the planet's center, 5,000 kilometers from Bubble World's edge.
Then it reached the planet's surface. You saw plains and real mountains. That must have been overwhelming.
There was nothing overwhelming. Spiral reached the seabed.
For a moment, Feng Fan had nothing to say.
The image from its seismowave communicator shook several times and vanished. Communication stopped completely. Other ships at lower levels heard one sound. Converted into your air sound, it was a pop. That was the sound of high-pressure seawater rushing instantly into spiral space.
Mechanical life from Bubble World and its instruments absolutely could not touch water. The powerful current from short-circuiting instantly vaporized the seawater that penetrated bodies and machines. At the instant seawater entered, Spiral's crew and equipment burst like bombs.
The Alliance then sent more than 10 ships in different directions, and all met the same event at the same altitude. Except for that mysterious pop, no more information returned. Twice, monitors showed strange crystalline fluctuations, but no one knew what they were.
Radar waves sent upward by following ships returned incomprehensible echoes, neither space nor rock.
For a time, the space-universe theory wavered. Scholars began proposing new models, fixing the universe's radius at 8,000 kilometers, and claiming that the vanished ships had touched the edge of the universe and entered nothingness.
The exploration movement faced a severe test. The space occupied by lost ships had once been recoverable in theory. Now, once a ship touched the edge of the universe, its space might be lost forever. At this point, even the most determined explorers faltered. Because in that world inside rock, space was not renewable. The Alliance decided to send 5 final ships. Near the 5,000-meter altitude, they would rise extremely slowly. If the same disaster occurred, exploration would be suspended. After 2 more ships were lost, the third, Rockbrain, achieved a breakthrough. At 5,000 meters, Rockbrain advanced upward with extreme caution. Near the seabed, the water did not collapse the roof rock and burst in at once. Instead, it entered through a narrow crack as a high-pressure jet.
Rockbrain's traveling section was 250 meters long, large for a high-stratum exploration ship. The water took nearly an hour to fill its space.
Before contact with water destroyed it, the onboard seismowave instruments recorded the form of the water and transmitted complete data and images back to the Alliance. In that way, the people of the core saw liquid for the first time.
Liquid may have existed in the remote past of Bubble World as molten magma. Later, the planet's geology stabilized, the magma solidified, and only solids remained in the core. Some scientists had predicted liquid theoretically, but no one believed such mythical matter truly existed.
Now people saw it with their own eyes. The white jet, the water level slowly rising inside the ship. They were stunned by this demonic substance that seemed to violate every physical law. It accepted the shape of anything it touched and penetrated the finest cracks.
Rock surfaces changed after contact with it. Their color darkened and their reflectivity increased. Most fascinating of all, most objects sank into the substance, but some fragments of exploded bodies and machines floated on its surface.
Those floating fragments had the same nature as the ones that sank. The people of the core named the liquid formless rock. Exploration then became somewhat easier. Alliance engineers designed an inlet pipe, a hollow drill rod 200 meters long.
After drilling through the rock, the drill head could open like a cap and led seawater into the pipe, which had a valve at the bottom. A ship carrying the pipe and drill rose to 5,000 meters. The pipe successfully pierced the rock and reached the seabed.
Drilling was the technology the core people knew best. But of another technology they knew nothing: sealing. Because Bubble World had no liquids and no gases, it had no sealing technology. The valve at the bottom of the pipe was poor. Before it was opened, water already leaked through.
In hindsight, this was fortunate. If the valve had opened fully, the kinetic energy of the incoming high-pressure water would have been far greater than the previous seepage, and the jet would have cut through everything like a laser.
As it was, the water leaking through the closed valve could be controlled. Imagine the explorers watching thin streams of seawater spray before their eyes. Their ignorance of liquid was like your ancestors' ignorance of electricity.
After carefully filling a metal container with water, the ship descended and buried the inlet pipe back in the rock. During descent, the explorers guarded that bucket of research sample with utmost care. Soon they made another discovery. Formless rock was transparent.
The earlier seepage had mixed with sand, so they had missed this. As the ship descended and temperature rose, the explorers were terrified to see formless rock come alive. Its surface churned angrily, covered with boiling bubbles.
Yet while displaying vitality, the monster consumed itself, turning into a ghostly white shadow and vanishing into the air.
When all the formless rock in the bucket became white specters, the explorers began feeling abnormalities in their bodies. Sparks of short-circuiting flashed inside them, and finally they became balls of fireworks and died in pain.
People at the Alliance base saw the horrific scene through seismowave images, but the monitor soon shorted out too. A rescue ship suffered the same fate. After docking with the descending ship, its own crew also short-circuited and died. It was as though formless rock had become a god of death filling all space, but scientists noticed that the short-circuiting was less violent than before. They concluded that as space volume increased, the density of the formless death decreased.
After paying still more lives, the core people finally discovered another state of matter they had never known: gas.
Part 9. The Starry Sky.
These major discoveries finally moved the government of Bubble World. It joined with its former enemies and entered the exploration project. Investment in exploration rose sharply. The final breakthrough was near.
Although knowledge of water vapor grew, the lack of sealing technology still prevented core scientists from avoiding its harm to life and instruments. But they had learned that above 4,500 meters, formless rock was dead. It would not boil.
So the core government and the Exploration Alliance built a laboratory at 4,800 meters, equipped with longer and better inlet pipes, devoted to the study of formless rock.
Only then did you begin doing the work of Archimedes.
Yes. But do not forget that in our primitive age we did the work of Faraday. In the formless rock laboratory, scientists discovered the laws of water pressure and buoyancy. Sealing technology related to liquids also developed and matured.
At last, people discovered that traveling in formless rock was very simple, far easier than traveling through strata. As long as a vessel was sealed and pressure-resistant, no digging was needed. It could rise through formless rock at an unimaginable speed.
That was the rocket of Bubble World.
It should be called a water rocket. The water rocket was an egg-shaped pressure-resistant metal container with no engine. It could hold only one explorer. Let us call him the Gagarin of Bubble World. Its launch platform lay at 5,000 meters in a spacious hall dug inside the strata.
1 hour before launch, Gagarin entered the water rocket and sealed the hatch. After all instruments and life support systems were confirmed normal, automatic tunneling machines broke the thin roof of rock, less than 10 meters thick.
With a thunderous crash, the immense pressure of the formless rock above collapsed the roof, and the water rocket was immersed in the deep sea. When the dust settled, Gagarin looked through the diamond window and saw the platform's 2 searchlights cast 2 beams into formless rock.
Because Bubble World had no air, light did not scatter. For the first time, a core person saw the shape of light. The seismowave instrument transmitted the launch command. Gagarin pulled the lever and released the hinge anchoring the rocket to the rock floor.
The water rocket slowly left the seabed, then accelerated quickly in formless rock floating upward.
From seabed pressure, scientists easily calculated that the thickness of formless rock above was about 10,000 meters. If nothing unexpected happened, the rocket would cover that distance in 15 minutes. What waited beyond was unknown.
The water rocket rose in silence. Beyond the window was bottomless darkness. Occasionally, a few particles suspended in formless rock streaked through the light, marking the rocket's speed.
Soon Gagarin felt panic. He was a life form of the solid world, entering the space of formless rock for the first time. A feeling of unsupported emptiness seized his whole mind.
The 15-minute voyage was unbearably long. It condensed 10,000 decades of core civilization's exploration and seemed endless. Just as Gagarin's mind was about to collapse, the water rocket rose onto the surface of the planet's sea.
Its upward inertia carried it more than 10 meters into the air. During the fall, Gagarin saw below him the immense surface of formless rock, glittering without end. He had no time to wonder where the reflected light came from. The rocket struck the sea heavily. White formless rock splashed all around, and the rocket floated like a boat, rocking gently on the waves. Gagarin cautiously opened the hatch and slowly leaned out. At once, he felt the sea wind. Only after a while did he understand that it was gas. Fear made him tremble. He had seen vapor moving in diamond tubes in the laboratory, but no one had imagined that such an enormous quantity of gas could exist in the universe.
Gagarin soon discovered that this gas was unlike the vapor formed by boiling formless rock. It did not short-circuit his body.
I felt it as the gentle touch of an invisible giant hand. That hand came from an infinitely vast existence we did not know. Before that existence, I became a new self.
Gagarin raised his head. At that moment, 10,000 decades of exploration by core civilization received its final reward. He saw the brilliant starry sky.
Part 10. Mountains are everywhere.
It was not easy. You went through such a long exploration only to stand at our starting point.
That is why yours is a fortunate civilization.
By then, the ice crystal clouds formed from the atmosphere escaping into space had expanded greatly, and the sky was bright. The spacecraft's lights scattered through the cloud into a ring of brilliant rainbow color.
Below, the giant well formed by the cyclone still roared and rotated like a colossal machine slowly crushing the earth. Yet the summit of the sea mountain was calmer than before. Even the ripples had vanished. The water was like a mirror, reminding Feng Fan again of the high lakes of northern Tibet.
He forced his thoughts back to reality.
Why have you come here?
We were only passing by. We saw that this place had an intelligent civilization, so we wanted to chat. Whoever first climbed to the summit of this mountain would be the one we spoke with.
The mountain was there. Someone would always climb it.
Yes. Climbing is an instinct of intelligent life. They want to stand higher and see farther, and that is not a need of survival. You are an example. If survival were your only concern, you would have fled far from this mountain. Instead, you climbed it.
Evolution gave intelligent civilizations the desire to ascend for a deeper reason. We do not yet know what that reason is. Mountains are everywhere. We are all still at the foot of them.
I am on the summit.
Feng Fan would not let anyone challenge the honor of his having climbed the highest peak in the world, not even aliens.
You are at the foot. We are all at the foot. Light speed is a foothill. Space is a foothill. Confined in the narrow valley of light speed and space, do you not feel cramped?
I was born this way. I am used to it.
Then what I say next will not feel familiar. Look at this universe. What do you feel?
Vastness. Infinity. Things like that.
Do you not feel cramped?
How could I? To me, the universe is infinite. To scientists, I think it is something like 20 billion light years.
Then I tell you this. It is a bubble world with a radius of 20 billion light years.
Feng Fan was silent.
Our universe is a hollow bubble inside a larger solid.
How is that possible? Would that larger solid not collapse under gravity?
At least it has not yet. Our bubble is still expanding inside the supersolid block. Gravitational collapse applies to finite solid blocks. If the solid enclosing our universe is infinite, collapse is not a problem.
Of course, this is only a conjecture. No one knows whether that solid superuniverse is finite. There are many other conjectures. Perhaps at larger scales, gravity is balanced by another force, just as electromagnetic force is balanced by nuclear force at microscopic scales.
We are unaware of that force, just as those inside Bubble World were unaware of universal gravitation. From the materials we have collected, your scientists have also speculated about a bubble-shaped universe. You simply do not know it.
What is that larger solid like? Is it also rock?
We do not know. We will know when we reach our destination 50,000 years from now.
Where are you going?
The edge of the universe. We are a bubble ship called Needle. Do you remember that name?
Yes. It was the ship that first discovered the density decrease in the strata of Bubble World.
Correct. We do not know what we will discover.
Are there other bubbles in the supersolid universe?
You are already thinking far.
It is impossible not to.
Imagine a few tiny bubbles in a massive rock. Even if they exist, they will be hard to find. But we are going to look.
You are truly great.
Our conversation has been pleasant, but we must continue our journey. 50,000 years is too long. We seize the day. It was good to know you. Remember, mountains are everywhere.
Because of the ice crystal clouds, the last line had become blurred. Then the enormous screen in space slowly darkened. The sphere itself began to shrink, soon becoming a point, once more an inconspicuous star in the sea of stars. It sped across the night sky and vanished in the west.
The space between sea and sky went dark. The ice crystal clouds and the cyclone well disappeared, leaving only a black confusion overhead. Feng Fan heard the roar of the surrounding storm rapidly diminish. It became a low whimper, then vanished completely, leaving only the sound of waves.
He felt himself falling. The sea around him was changing shape. The rounded summit of the sea mountain flattened, like a great umbrella opening. He knew the seawater mountain was disappearing. He was falling from an altitude of 9,000 meters towards sea level.
In his perception, only 2 or 3 minutes passed before the water he floated on stopped descending. He knew because his body's downward inertia carried him under the now still surface. Fortunately, he did not sink deep, and soon swam back up.
Around him was normal sea. The sea mountain had vanished without trace, as if it had never existed. The storm had stopped completely. Though its intensity had been immense, it had lasted only briefly and stirred only surface waves. The sea was already calming.
Much of the ice crystal cloud had dispersed, and the brilliant starry sky appeared again. Feng Fan looked up and imagined that distant world. It was so far away that even light would grow weary. Long ago, on that other sea, the Gagarin of Bubble World had looked up at the stars as he was doing now.
Across the vast desert of space and time, their souls touched. Feng Fan suddenly felt sick and vomited something. From the taste in his mouth, he knew it was blood.
At the 9,000-meter summit of the sea mountain, he had developed altitude sickness. Pulmonary edema was causing bleeding. It was dangerous. With gravity suddenly restored, he was too weak to move and was held up only by his life jacket.
He did not know Bluewater's fate, but he could be almost certain that within 1,000 kilometers there was no ship. When he reached the summit of the sea mountain, Feng Fan had felt that his life was complete. At that moment, he could have died calmly.
Now, suddenly, he had become the person most afraid of death in the world. He had climbed the roof of the world made of rock, and now the highest peak in the world made of seawater. What kind of mountain would he climb next? Whatever it was, he had to be alive to know.
The feeling from the Everest blizzard returned. That feeling had made him cut the rope joining him to his companions and the woman he loved, sending them into the world of death. Now he knew he had been right. If at this moment there were anything he could betray to save his life, he would betray it.
He had to live, because mountains are everywhere.